You wake up to a chill in the air, the kind that seeps into your bones even though there's no frost outside. The wind doesn't whistle, it sulks. Something's wrong in Asgard. The kind of wrong that makes ravens hush and tree leaves twitch. You shift beneath your woolen cloak and feel the disturbance vibrating through the floor like distant thunder. And then it hits you literally. A booming voice so loud it rattles your spine. Where is my hammer? You blink slowly. Ah, of course. That hammer. The one that could level a mountain with a sigh. The one forged in the heart of a dying star, or possibly in a very enthusiastic dwarf's forge, depending on which version you've heard. Either way, Mjolnir is gone, and Thor is not taking it well. You peer around the vast golden hall. Thor, with his red hair tangled from sleep, and his eyes glowing like a storm barely leashed, is stomping about like a toddler denied a cookie the size of a continent. His boots slam the floor with every step. The Valkyries are wisely avoiding eye contact. Even Odin's two ravens, usually so full of mysterious riddles, are huddled near the ceiling, pretending to be invisible. You try to speak up, maybe, to suggest retracing his steps. But this isn't a lost sandal. Mjolnir doesn't just roll under the bed or get left at a bar after one too many rounds of godly mead. No, when Thor's hammer disappears, it means something cosmic, cataclysmic, and probably extremely inconvenient for the rest of the realms. You sigh. This is going to be one of those days. The problem is Mjolnir isn't just a weapon. It's the thunder god's everything, his ego, his comfort blanket. His lightning rod, literally. Without it, he's just a very angry man with impressive shoulders and a tendency to punch problems that don't respond to polite words. Asgard without Mjolnir is like a wedding without chaos, or Loki without sarcasm. Thor snatches open a cabinet. Just mead. He kicks a chest. Linen tunics go flying. You feel for the servants who now have to iron that many sleeves. You wonder, absently, if hammers ever walk off on their own. Stranger things have happened, ask the talking goats. Thor spins toward you, eyes wild. It's gone, he declares, as though you might have missed the last 20 minutes of theatrical stomping and yelling. You nod solemnly, trying to look helpful. And you're sure you didn't lend it to someone? His nostrils flare. Would I lend Mjolnir? What kind of fool? Okay, not the moment for jokes. Still, the absurdity of it all crackles in the air. The god, supposedly all-knowing, all-powerful, reduced to a glorified treasure hunt because someone misplaced the divine equivalent of a wrecking ball. And that's when the realization settles in your chest like cold honey. If Mjolnir has truly vanished, something big is about to follow it. The thunder outside starts to grumble. Trees shake off their leaves like nervous squirrels. Thor growls something about interrogating every living being, from Yggdrasil's roots to the top of Valhalla. And you just pull your cloak tighter and prepare for a very long day. Because history may call it myth. Scholars might frame it as poetry, huh? But right now, you're here. You're part of the drama. And the hammer that holds together the fragile piece of the Nine Realms is missing. Somewhere out there, someone has done something very foolish and very bold. And whatever comes next, you're in it now, storm silk and all. You think you've seen Thor angry before when someone scratches his goat chariot, or when Loki tells people about the time Thor lost an arm wrestling match to an old lady, which, in fairness, was more metaphysical than embarrassing. But this is different. This is a god without his hammer, and not just any hammer. Mjolnir is no average tool. It's not a garden-variety mallet or a ceremonial symbol like some dusty royal scepter. No. Mjolnir is the nuclear option with a handle, forged by dwarves, Brokkr and Sindri, supposedly, with a dash of sunlight, a smidge of thunder, and maybe some enchanted iron that makes your teeth itch when you look at it too long. You stand near the Bifrost, now gazing down at the swirling spectrum of the 9 realms. Heimdall, keeper of the Rainbow Bridge and the original I See Everything Grump, leans silently on his great sword, watching you and Thor pace like worried parents in a maternity ward. You can feel the tension ripple through the air. Without Mjolnir, Thor mutters the frost giants could overrun Midgard by lunchtime. He's not being dramatic, not entirely. The hammer is more than a bludgeon. It's a weather regulator, a weapon of mass destruction, and a deterrent wrapped in myth and metal. It keeps giants trembling, storms balanced, and let's be honest, Thor's sense of purpose comfortably inflated. Historians still argue whether Mjolnir symbolized the authority of kingship, the power of natural forces, or just a really effective bug squasher for the god of thunder. But to you, watching Thor pace with fists clenched and lightning flickering at his fingertips, it's clear this hammer holds everything together. Thor recounts some of its talents to no one in particular. It levels mountains. It returns when thrown. It summons lightning. It can shrink to fit in my belt or grow large enough to crack a glacier in half. You nod politely. You've heard this speech before, possibly at parties. He turns toward you suddenly. Remember when I dropped it on that one dwarf's foot, and the whole forge cracked open? You do. The dwarf does not. Still, you try to help. Maybe you left it in the hot springs again. That earns you a glare sharp enough to shave ice. You sigh and rub your eyes. Asgard's defenses are already flickering. The magical wards that rely on Mjolnir's stabilizing energy are now pulsing erratically. The skies feel off. Clouds are gathering in strange, scowling patterns. Elsewhere in the realm, peasants are probably sacrificing goats, just in case. One village might have already built a shrine to a potato if it started raining blood. Mjolnir's gone, and that makes everyone nervous. You walk back through the great hall of Valaskialf, Odin's favorite observation lounge. You note the missing hammer's pedestal, where it used to sit when Thor wasn't smiting things or hurling it across dimensions. The spot is cold now, abandoned. The air around it feels hollow, like a laugh that never came. In the corner, Loki leans in the shadows. His smile is thin as thread. Awfully quiet in here, he purrs without the comforting clang of violence. You look at him with narrowed eyes. Don't be boring, Loki adds, flicking imaginary lint from his tunic. If I had stolen it, I'd leave behind a riddle. Or maybe a goose. You're not sure what the goose would accomplish, but you admit he has a point. This doesn't feel like Loki's style. It feels too quiet, too calculated, too frost giant. And that's when it clicks. Jotunheim, the realm of giants, cold, jagged, cruel. Not known for their poetry or fashion sense, but absolutely known for wanting to make the Aesir miserable. The hammer disappearing without fanfare, that feels like something Thrym would do. Thrym the giant who once tried to bribe Odin with frost sculptures of himself. Thrym who thinks subtlety is a kind of cheese. You don't say anything yet. The idea needs confirmation. But your stomach knots with that familiar creeping certainty. Someone out there is holding the hammer hostage. Thor slams his fist into a stone pillar, cracking it clean in half. Marble dust rains down like divine dandruff. You step back, because now the real search begins. And wherever the hammer is, someone's going to wish they hadn't touched it. You find yourself drifting somewhere between divine frustration and mortal awkwardness, as Thor calls an emergency meeting of the gods. The Aesir arrive in shimmering cloaks, some barely awake, others looking far too chipper for a realm on the brink of magical collapse. Freya glides in trailing perfume and suspicion, Balder radiant and serene as ever, lounges against a golden column, likely composing poetry in his head about how unfortunate hammer loss is a metaphor for fading light. Even Tyr, ever the pragmatist, raises one skeptical eyebrow at Thor's pacing. The room is thick with tension and incense, and then Loki walks in. Now Loki doesn't walk anywhere. He prowls, glides, saunters like a man who knows 3 secrets you'll never guess and is choosing to say nothing for now. His green cloak flutters dramatically, which is annoying because there's no wind indoors. You watch him survey the room with a smirk, eyes gleaming like someone who's just realized he's not in trouble yet. Well, he says, which of you noble gods mislaid the most powerful object in all of creation? Was it left under a goose, inside an ale barrel? Perhaps tucked into Heimdall's hair for safekeeping. Heimdall, bless him, does not blink. His patience is carved from stone and judgment. Thor growls, "Do not test me, trickster. My temper is thin." Loki holds up both hands. Peace, peace. I merely observe that a hammer is not the sort of thing that tiptoes away in the night. This is deliberate, calculated, stolen. You glance around. Freya taps her fingernails on the table like war drums. Odin hasn't spoken yet, which makes everyone nervous. When Odin's quiet, it means his ravens are whispering something unpleasant. Or he's drafting another impossibly cryptic poem about fate. You decide to test the waters. What if a frost giant took it, you say softly? Loki's eyes narrow. Interesting theory. Thor stops pacing. Thrym. The name lands like a dropped brick. Thrym, king of the Jotunheim. Not particularly clever, but stubborn as tree bark and twice as dry. He once tried to freeze the Yggdrasil tree just to see what would happen. It didn't work. The squirrel Nidhogg bit his ankle and ran off with his crown. Embarrassing, but he's held a grudge ever since. The room begins buzzing with accusations. Freya, he's always asking to marry me. The creep. Balder. He tried to sell me enchanted socks last spring. They didn't work. Tyr, if Thrym has the hammer, he'll demand something stupid. Odin finally stirs. He fixes his single eye on Loki. You know how they think. Go. Find the truth. It's not a request. It's prophecy delivered in dad voice. Loki sighs dramatically, but you catch the gleam of excitement behind the exasperation. The truth is, Loki lives for this. Spying, scheming, sleight-of-hand diplomacy. And shape-shifting, of course. You're not sure why he insists on turning into birds so often. Maybe feathers help him think. With a lazy stretch, he turns into a falcon and disappears into the rafters with a sarcastic squawk. Thor growls something about not trusting him. You just wait. Because if Loki's right, and let's face it, he usually is when it's inconvenient, then this isn't just about a stolen hammer. This is going to get personal and loud and probably ridiculous. When Loki returns from Jotunheim, he's still in falcon form. He glides into the great hall with a smug little wing flap and a twinkle in his beady eye that tells you before he even speaks that something absurd has happened. Again. He lands with flair on the edge of Odin's high seat, ruffles his feathers, and shifts back into his usual shape in a blur of green fabric and unnecessary dramatics. Well, he says, grinning, you're not going to like this. Thor glares. Where is it? Oh, the hammer's fine. Cozy, actually. Buried 8 miles underground in Thrym's treasure vault, guarded by frost wolves' riddles and at least one very bored troll. But yes, safe. You blink, and why exactly is it down there? Loki draws a breath, clearly savoring the reveal. Because Thrym will only return Mjolnir if he's given a bride. Specifically. He pauses. Freya. The room stills. You swear you can hear a raven drop a peanut somewhere on the roof. Freya's jaw clenches. Her jewelry hums ominously, like it's debating leaping off her neck and strangling someone on her behalf. Absolutely not, she says. Not even if the 9 realms implode. See Loki gestures. I told you no one would like it. You meanwhile are trying to wrap your head around the image, one of the most terrifying beings in Jotunheim, sulking on his frozen throne, pining for Freya, like a lovesick teenager, writing bad poetry with icicles. You ask cautiously, was he serious? Loki nods, as serious as a snowstorm in a library. He said, and I quote, "Bring me the goddess Freya, veiled and wedded, and I shall give back the thunder weapon." Then he giggled and offered me pickled reindeer tongue. You're not sure which part is worse. Freya stands furious. I am not a bargaining chip. I will not marry a lumpy ice thing who smells like fermented yak. Loki bows deeply. Of course not, my lady, but he doesn't know that. Thor finally speaks. His voice is low. We go to war. Odin raises a single hand. Without Mjolnir, we cannot win. If Thrym uses it, silence falls again. You glance sideways at Loki. His smile is too calm. He's chewing on an idea, and when he's calm, it usually means someone is about to wear something ridiculous. I have a plan, he says way too cheerfully. Oh no. You've seen this before. This is how goats end up wearing helmets, and ravens wind up married to trees. Still, the gods lean in, because as much as Loki lies, he's also the only one who ever does anything. He waves a finger in the air like a magician about to pull a squid from a hat. We give Thrym his bride, he says. Everyone stares. He adds, we disguise Thor as Freya. There is a long, horrible pause. Then Thor makes a sound like an earthquake made of rage. You want me to wear a dress? Loki beams, just temporarily. You watch Thor's face turn the color of volcanic rock. His hands flex like he's imagining throttling someone with a bridal veil. The sheer violence radiating from him would vaporize a lesser man. Loki, unfazed, continues. Just until the hammer's back in your hands, then you can do your usual, smashy bits. You think about it, honestly it could work. Thrym isn't bright. As long as Thor doesn't talk too much or eat too aggressively, maybe this plan could succeed. Historians still argue, Loki says absently, whether Thrym actually believed the disguise or just pretended to because he thought it would be funny. You rub your temples. You are not getting paid enough for this. The sound that comes out of Freya is not so much a laugh as it is a detonation. Her eyes spark like flint, and her necklace, brisingamen forged by dwarves and fueled entirely by drama, glows with a pulsing light that makes everyone suddenly reconsider the proximity of their eyebrows. You want me, she says, voice trembling with fury, to hand over my wedding dress so that Thor can play, pretend in my clothes and marry a giant who smells like cold goat milk. Loki doesn't flinch. Just for a day, a few hours even. Long enough to grab the hammer and explode the wedding venue. Freya lifts a goblet and throws it against the wall. It shatters wine dripping like blood down gold-paneled walls. Absolutely not. You edge away slowly, just in case she hurls the next thing, which might be a chair or Balder. She's pacing now, muttering under her breath in Old Norse, which you don't speak fluently, but you're pretty sure one of the phrases translates to boil his lungs. The other gods murmur nervously. Even Thor, still pink from the humiliation proposal, goes quiet as Freya glares at him. Let me get this straight, she snarls. While I sit here guarding the realm, you want me to lend out my identity to a man who eats like a troll, bathes once a lunar eclipse, and thinks jewelry is only for tying up goat harnesses. Thor looks mildly offended, which is fair. He bathes at least once a month. Freya jabs a finger at Loki. And you think this is funny? Oh yes, Loki says, with the solemnity of someone trying not to laugh out loud. Tragic. Deeply tragic. You sit beside Tyr as the conversation melts into shouting and divine pouting. Tyr leans over. Historians still argue whether this myth was satire, a fertility rite parody, or the world's oldest drag comedy. You whisper, can it be all three? He shrugs. You watch Freya rage across the floor like a storm goddess auditioning for a musical. She finally turns to Odin and points sharply. If you want this done, then you wear the veil. Odin smiles faintly. Wouldn't fit my eye patch. The room waits and waits until Freya finally growls something about fine one time, and I want a dozen emeralds afterward. She yanks the ribbon from her sleeve and tosses it at Thor like a thrown dagger. Try not to rip it, she snaps. It's vintage. Thor catches the ribbon and stares at it, as if it's made of poison ivy. Loki claps his hands with the enthusiasm of a man about to witness something immortal and ridiculous. Marvelous. Now let's get started. We have a thunder god to glam up. You sit back, the absurdity curling around you like smoke. Somewhere out there, Thrym is chilling in his icy fortress, imagining wedding cakes and vows and probably knitting a sweater with F+T stitched across the front. And here in Asgard, the gods are preparing for the world's strangest bridal party. This is going to be a disaster. You sincerely hope you don't miss a single second. So here you are sitting on a velvet stool in the middle of a golden hall, while the most powerful beings in the cosmos gather to solve a problem with brace yourself. Fashion design. Thor stands in the center, arms crossed, looking like a sulky statue, carved entirely out of stubbornness and muscles. Around him, a growing pile of silk lace and flowing fabric from Freya's private wardrobe. A growing committee of gods and goddesses circles him, offering unsolicited suggestions. You'll need something to hide that neck, says Idun, wrinkling her nose. Maybe a high collar, or a turtleneck bridal veil, Loki offers, deadpan. Very trendy this millennium, Thor growls. You're doing your best not to laugh, or to breathe too loudly, or to blink in a way that might anger the thunder god currently being measured for a corset. At the head of the impromptu wedding planning committee stands Heimdall, oddly serene. You'd think the god who watches all would have better things to do, but no. Heimdall has taken personal charge of what he refers to with completely straight face as Operation Blushing Bride. Thor will wear the veil, he says calmly, as if this is the sort of statement one makes every Tuesday. Thor glares. I will not wear pearls. You will, Heimdall replies, because they draw attention to the eyes, and we do not want him looking at your beard. Loki leans against a column, visibly enjoying every second. You'll make a stunning bride. Radiant. Thunderous. Just imagine the wedding photos. Historians still argue, he adds, glancing your way, whether Heimdall was being sincere or sarcastic in these verses. The poetic form doesn't really allow for sarcasm indicators. You mutter maybe they needed emoji. Meanwhile, Thor begins to fidget as 4 handmaidens circle him like tailors, fitting a very explosive mannequin. One tucks the veil under his helmet. Yes, he's insisting on keeping. The helmet another pins a jeweled brooch shaped like a swan to the neckline. You watch as they argue about color theory. White says innocence says one, but red says vengeance says another. Do we want the giant to survive the honeymoon, asks Loki. At some point, someone suggests a flower crown. Touch my head, Thor growls, and you will lose your fingers. Still, the transformation is progressing. Thor in a dress is somewhere between deeply unsettling and oddly majestic. His massive shoulders stretch the fabric like it's a bedsheet on a boulder. His beard peeks out beneath the veil like a curtain of doom. And the earrings, glittering jangly, enchanted by Idun herself, make a faint chiming sound that is equal parts wedding bell and war drum. Now Heimdall says, holding up a hand, we must practice the voice. Everyone pauses. Thor narrows his eyes. What voice? Your bride voice. You hold your breath. Say something soft, Heimdall instructs. Gentle. Suspiciously flirtatious. Thor mutters something so low it sounds like thunder grumbling in a storm cloud. Louder, Heimdall says. Thor inhales, face purple, then growls, "I am so happy to marry Thrym." There is a beat of silence. Then Loki falls over laughing. "You can't help it. A snort escapes." Thor's expression could split stone. But honestly, it's working. The absurdity is what sells it. And the plan, as insane as it sounds, just might work. Because Thrym wouldn't recognize subtlety if it ice-skated across his soup. He wants Freya any Freya. He wants the hammer, and he wants to look important in front of his giant pals. So Thor Wore, God, Sky Brawler, champion of the Thunderbolt, is going to be that bride. And you're invited to the wedding of the century. Hope you brought a gift. There's pouting, and then there's divine-level sulking. And Thor has perfected the latter. You follow him as he storms well, trudges dramatically. Down the corridor toward his chambers, muttering thunderously with every step. He's still wearing half the gown, the veil trailing behind like a flag of defeat. He looks like someone forced a berserker into a bridal boutique at axe point. "This is an insult," he hisses. "A dishonor. A frilly farce." You nod sympathetically while discreetly adjusting one of the silk sleeves hanging off his massive shoulder. Could be worse. You could be marrying Loki. "Don't joke," Thor growls. "He suggested that earlier." He did, loudly and only half as a joke. Once back in his quarters, Thor collapses onto a mountain of cushions with the weight of someone contemplating the end of days. Which, let's be honest, could happen during this wedding if things go wrong. "This is my lowest moment," he grunts. You raise an eyebrow. Lower than the time you got stuck in that drinking horn that turned out to be a sea. He grumbles something that might be Norse for "shut up." Meanwhile, Loki arrives uninvited, of course, twirling a bouquet of frost flowers he almost certainly stole from Thrym's garden. While he chirps, our radiant bride is brooding. That's good. Mystique is fashionable this century. Thor hurls a cushion at him. Loki catches it effortlessly and sets it under his own head like he's about to take a nap. I'm just saying Loki continues now upside down that you're doing better than expected. You've only broken one corset and 3 combs. You sigh and decide to help. Let's go over the plan again. Because let's be clear, this isn't just cosplay. This is infiltration, intrigue, improvised chaos in a wedding veil. Step 1, Thor disguised as Freya arrives at Thrym's hall. Step 2, he keeps quiet, smiles, doesn't crush anyone immediately. Step 3, Thrym, overjoyed, produces Mjolnir as a wedding gift to seal the marriage. Step 4, Thor grabs it and promptly ends the engagement with a bang. There's only one problem. Thor is many things, strong, brave, excellent at dramatic lightning entrances, but subtle, not exactly in his skill set. "I can't do this," he mutters into a satin pillow. "I don't blush. I don't giggle. I crush skulls and drink mead from hollowed-out enemies." Well, Loki says you're about to do both, just in a lace collar. You glance at the clock, wait, no, the enchanted sundial with tiny screaming dwarves. Either way, it's nearly time. The chariot is ready. The goats have been brushed and enchanted to prance properly. The snow paths to Jotunheim have been cleared by magic or brute force. You're not sure which. You'll need to walk with elegance, says he done, gently arriving with a handful of flowers, and no idea what she's walking into. Thor lifts his head. "I stomp. That's how I walk." "Not today, darling." The next half hour is a blur of final touches. Ribbons. Perfume that smells like crushed pine and regret. A tiara you know was last worn during Ragnarok rehearsal. It's all a bit much, honestly. But by the end of it, Thor stands there in full bridal glory. Towering, glittering, murderous. He looks, well, like someone you do not want to disappoint at the altar. Historians still argue whether Thor genuinely passed as Freya Loki muses, or whether Thrym just didn't care. You look at the hammer-shaped brooch pinned to the dress's chest. Ironic, yes. Subtle. Not even slightly. Still, you can't help but smile. Because the gods may be flawed, petty, theatrical. But when they scheme, they commit. The goats are ready. Now, these aren't ordinary goats. These are enchanted Goats. Tooth Gnasher and Tooth Grinder, the majestic furious, slightly unhinged beasts that pull Thor's chariot across the skies with the enthusiasm of caffeinated dragons. You mount up beside the veiled bride and try not to look directly at the goat's eyes, which gleam with unspoken trauma and mild resentment. The chariot rattles to life, with a flash of lightning and a loud crack, launching into the air like a divine roller coaster. Snow sprays upward as you ascend the wind, howling around you in long, twisting gusts. The veil flaps, the ribbons dance. Thor mutters curses into the cold as the mountains of Jotunheim rise in the distance like jagged teeth. You sneak a glance at him. Her, for today, sitting beside you in full bridal regalia, arms folded over an uncomfortable-looking corset. His beard sticks out from beneath the veil like a nest made of anger. The dress sparkles. It's hard not to laugh. I swear Thor growls if anyone says I look lovely. I will reduce them to mist. You clear your throat. You look ominously elegant. He grunts, acceptable. Loki disguised as a handmaiden, flowing skirts, golden tiara, suspiciously smug, leans in from behind you. Remember my thunderous tulip no punching until the hammer is in hand. Thor doesn't reply. He's too busy scanning the horizon like a bride preparing for ambush. The trip to Jotunheim is long and freezing. Snowflakes pelt your face with sharp little stings, the mountains looming ever larger until the fortress appears. Thrym's hall, carved from ice, taller than any building in Asgard, and decorated, unfortunately, with crude statues of Thrym himself in heroic poses. Look at that one, Loki mutters. He sculpted himself wrestling a bear. The bear looks embarrassed. You nod, it does. Guards at the gate, giants with icy breath and tusks that shimmer like broken glaciers, peer down as the chariot descends. Their eyes widen. One elbows the other. Freya's here, he whispers loudly. Wow, she's tall. You whisper back to Thor, try not to crush their feet. The gates creak open, and the wedding party begins. Inside the icy hall, Thrym waits. He is enormous, hulking, covered in furs and ceremonial braids that look like they were done by someone using tree trunks as fingers. His smile when he sees Freya stretches ear to ear like an overconfident shark. She's even more beautiful than I remembered, Thrym says, elbowing a cousin, who nods far too enthusiastically. That's her, all right. Just like the gossip scroll said. You glance at Loki. He's trying not to burst into laughter. Thor steps forward, veil, fluttering hands delicately clasped, well clenched, and manages a low curtsy that looks like he's preparing for a tackle. Thrym leans in. You seem taller than usual. Loki twirls a ribbon in his fingers. Oh, she's just radiant with excitement. Thrym beams, entirely convinced. Historians still argue whether Thrym actually believed any of this or simply didn't care, because he thought marrying any goddess would make him look impressive in front of his drinking buddies. The feast begins. It is chaos. Tables groan under mountains of roasted boar, steaming cauldrons of soup barrels of mead, so large you could bathe a frost giant in them. Everyone toasts the happy couple. You try not to choke. Thrym sits beside Thor, eyes gleaming with glee. Eat my love feast until your belly bursts. And oh, Thor eats. He devours 8 whole salmon, a roast ox, 3 trays of dumplings, and enough mead to drown a fleet. Everyone watches, stunned. Thrym whispers, she must be really hungry from the journey. You nod solemnly, very passionate about nutrition. At one point, Thor nearly blows the whole thing by growling when a giant tries to braid his hair. Loki covers it quickly. She's shy, deeply shy, can't stand to be touched. Thrym chuckles. She'll warm up once we're married. You feel the table vibrate with restrained rage. Then, just when the tension is high enough to slice, Thrym stands and claps his meaty hands. Bring the hammer, he bellows. Your breath catches. 2 guards enter, carrying a silk-draped bundle. Reverently, carefully. They approach the head table. Thrym grins at Freya. As a token of my love, I return your little weapon. May it bless our marriage bed. You nearly choke again. The hammer is placed in Thor's lap, and time stops. You can feel it, the power radiating from it. The storm contained, waiting, calling. Thor lowers his gaze behind the veil, and his fingers tighten around the handle. Oh, Thrym, you beautiful, clueless idiot. Thrym grins like a man who thinks the worst is behind him. You, on the other hand, are sitting very, very still, because the moment Thor's fingers wrap around Mjolnir so gently, so reverently, it's not just a bride holding a gift anymore. It's a thunder god waking up from a dream. The hall gets quiet, unnaturally quiet, as if the ice itself is holding its breath. Loki, still in full handmaiden drag, is inching away from the table with the grace of someone trying to avoid being turned into shrapnel. He knows what's coming. You know what's coming. Thrym, bless him, does not. He lifts a goblet. Let us raise our drinks in honor of our union. Boom. The veil flies off like it's been hit by a hurricane. Thor rises to his full, terrifying height, beard, wild eyes, blazing with stormlight gown fluttering like a battle flag. The entire dress ensemble somehow becomes more intimidating, not less. The ribbons snap in the wind. The corset creaks in fear. Thrym freezes. Freya. No. Thor growls, voice rumbling from somewhere between this world and the next. But you're about to meet her in the afterlife. Mjolnir flies into the air and returns to Thor's hand in a perfect arc, leaving a trail of lightning so bright it blinds half the front row. The room erupts into panic. Giants scream. Tables flip. A roast pig flies through the air. Thor lets out a war cry that could shatter glaciers and brings the hammer down on the first unlucky cousin who lunges at him. There's a crunch, a flash, and then only smoking boots remain. Loki yells. That's the signal, and flings off his tiara mid-sprint. You leap behind an overturned table as Mjolnir becomes a blur, smashing through walls, flattening warriors, reducing furniture to ash. Thor moves like a tempest in pearls, laughing now mad with relief and revenge. You wanted a wedding, he roars, slamming Thrym's uncle into a decorative ice sculpture. So here's your reception. Thrym finally gets to his feet, slow and trembling. This is a misunderstanding, he pleads, holding up his arms. I only wanted a wife. Thor hurls a lightning bolt that misses his head by an inch. Then you should have tried a dating scroll. Coward. It's chaos. A divine rom-com turned slasher flick. Frost giants fall left and right, some trying to flee others, throwing chairs or fish or just running in circles. One grabs a soup tureen as a shield. It doesn't help. You duck past a collapsing pillar, narrowly avoiding a flying harp. Somewhere Loki is fighting 3 giants using only a cake knife and a chair leg. Thor hurls Mjolnir again, and it zips back into his hand like an eager pet. Another giant tries to throw a wedding gift. Thor catches it, opens it mid-battle a tea set, and still flattens the guy. It's a performance, a spectacle. You can't help it. You start laughing. Because this is absurd, hilarious, terrifying, and somehow exactly what you expected. Historians still argue whether the destruction of Thrym's hall was justified divine vengeance, or just Thor letting off steam after a deeply embarrassing week of bridal fittings and emotional repression. The answer is probably both. By the time the dust settles, the wedding is over. The guests are gone, fled flattened or fried. The hall is a wreck. Chunks of ceiling lie in piles. There's gravy on the ceiling. And in the middle of it all stands Thor, radiant and rumpled veil, torn Mjolnir crackling in his hand. He looks at you. What he asks? It was going so well. You snort. You missed the bouquet toss. The wedding is over. In the absolute sense of the word. You pick your way carefully across what used to be a banquet hall and now resembles the aftermath of a thunderstorm in a butcher's shop. Icicles drip sadly from the ceiling. One of Thrym's statues has melted into a puddle that looks like it's weeping. A soup pot sits in a crater. Somewhere beneath a table, a frost giant cousin is pretending to be a bearskin rug. Thor stands in the middle of it all, dressed in tatters, lightning still dancing lazily around his shoulders like static clinging to a cat. The veil dangles from his helmet, spike like the world's worst party streamer. Mjolnir hums contentedly in his grip like a dog that just got to chase squirrels all afternoon. Well, says Loki, emerging from a pile of rubble, and crushed mead barrels tiara askew that went exactly as planned. You give him a look. Oh, come on, he says, brushing pastry crumbs off his skirts. You have to admit it was entertaining. You survey the wreckage, dozens of unconscious giants, several collapsed pillars, and what you're fairly sure is a roasted turnip embedded in the wall. That's one word for it. Thor grunts. I got my hammer back. Did you get your dignity back too? Loki teases. Thor doesn't respond. He's too busy using Mjolnir to idly flip over tables in search of snacks. Apparently fighting builds an appetite. You watch him down half a smoked deer leg in one bite, then point the hammer toward the far wall where Thrym's prized tapestry, a horrifying depiction of him riding a yak, burst into flame. Was that necessary, you ask? Thor shrugs, symbolic. You take a seat on an overturned chair, legs crossed, letting your breath catch up with your body. The adrenaline's wearing off, now replaced by a strange quiet. Snow drifts lazily through a hole in the roof. Somewhere in the corner, a giant's ceremonial drum is still slowly rolling across the floor like a confused turtle. It's oddly peaceful, in a we just witnessed an act of divine terror sort of way. Loki finds a surviving bottle of mead and pours 2 cups, one for you, one for himself. To deception cross-dressing and spontaneous architecture destruction, he toasts. You clink cups. Mjölnir crackles. You sip, letting the warm, honeyed drink slide down your throat. It tastes like burned sugar and satisfaction. Historians still argue Loki muses whether this tale was meant to be a metaphor for the futility of forced marriage alliances or just an excuse to put Thor in a dress. You lean back against a broken pillar. Can it be both? Everything's both, he replies, especially the ridiculous things. You think about that as Thor smashes a final statue of Thrym, this one doing a dramatic pose with a fish, and declares the wedding officially annulled. You sigh and stretch bones popping. So what now? Now, Loki says, we return home. He whistles, and with a crack of light, the goats arrive. Still frosty, still bitter, but apparently willing to fly again. You suspect they've seen worse. Thor climbs aboard bridal skirt, flapping in the wind, and you follow. The chariot lurches skyward, leaving the wreckage of Jotunheim behind. Below, Thrym's ruined fortress glows faintly in the snow like a warning or a punchline frozen in place. Asgard waits on the horizon. And you can't help but smile. Because sometimes history isn't about kings and conquests and dusty scrolls. Sometimes it's about gods in wedding gowns, tricksters with tiaras, and the ridiculous things we do for what matters most, like thunder, and pride, and hammers that always come home. As you soar over the frost-bitten ridges of Jotunheim, watching the wreckage shrink behind you, Thor sits beside you in silence. The wind tugs at what's left of his wedding veil, now mostly just a tangle of lace and soot fluttering like a surrender flag that's changed its mind. Mjolnir rests in his lap, gleaming contentedly. It seems to pulse with satisfaction, as if it too enjoyed the chaos. You suppose it is a sentient hammer, at least partially. The dwarves never made that entirely clear. Thor says nothing. He just stares into the stormy clouds ahead, his face unreadable. You glance over hesitant. You all right? He exhales. I wore a corset. I ate an entire ox. I was proposed to by a giant named Thrym, who thought I was his blushing bride. He pauses. And I smashed his entire hall to gravel. You wait, then I'm fine. There's a long beat of quiet between you. The kind only earned after colossal absurdity and a satisfying number of explosions. Below, the world drifts past snow-laced forests, fjords glittering in the moonlight, tiny villages where farmers are probably lighting candles to Freya and asking for a decent harvest, unaware she just lent her jewelry to a rampaging war god in drag. You look back at Thor. So, you gonna keep the dress? He snorts. Absolutely not. Loki pops up from behind you like a mischievous jack-in-the-box, now wearing his dress like it's designer couture. Pity, he says, striking a pose. It really brought out your rage. You roll your eyes. How long are you going to milk this? Oh, eternally, Loki replies cheerfully. You don't get divine theater like that every day. We'll be telling this one at feasts until Ragnarok. You shift in your seat, adjusting your cloak against the cold. You think Thrym survived? Thor shrugs. Don't know, don't care. You suspect that's only partially true. For all his thunder, Thor has never been a god who enjoys killing, unless someone really asks for it, usually by stealing his stuff or interrupting his mead night. The chariot begins to descend the golden towers of Asgard, rising to meet you. Bifrost shimmers beneath you like a floating prism, solid and ephemeral all at once. Heimdall stands at his post, utterly still, sword in hand, eyes glowing with the calm judgment of someone who has already seen every outcome. As you land, the chariot thuds softly on the rainbow bridge, and the goats immediately flop onto their sides in protest. Thor steps down dress-torn hammer, at his side, beard singed at the edges. Heimdall raises an eyebrow. Thor answers the unspoken question with a tired grunt. The wedding is off. Loki hops down next, grinning. And what a ceremony it was. Very intimate. Just the bride, the groom, and about 50 corpses. Heimdall doesn't flinch. He simply nods and mutters, "Welcome home." As you cross into Asgard, a small crowd is gathered. The Valkyries, a few curious dwarves, even Balder, who claps slowly and dramatically. Thor groans. Freya, arms crossed, waits on the steps of the palace. Her expression is complicated. A mixture of annoyance, satisfaction, and something you might generously call respect. You owe me a new necklace, she says flatly. And at least 3 goats. Thor nods, saying nothing. Freya looks at the tattered dress, then back at Thor. Her mouth twitches. She doesn't smile, not exactly, but she almost does. You wore it well, she says. Thor glares. Loki howls with laughter. You catch up beside them as the procession makes its way inside. Everyone's talking now, asking what happened, who got smashed, what Thrym's face looked like, when Thor said, "I do," with a growl. But you let the noise wash over you. Because beneath the jokes and whispers and clanking armor, something quiet lingers. Thor got his hammer back. Asgard is safe, and for all the madness, the gods pulled it off together, even if one of them had to wear heels to do it. Later that evening, as twilight settles over Asgard in long amber streaks, you find yourself walking the echoing corridors of the palace alone. You needed air, quiet, a moment to let your mind catch up with everything it's just witnessed. The absurdity, the chaos, the sheer theatricality of a thunder god in a tiara committing targeted wedding vengeance with the precision of a stage actor and the fury of a monsoon. And yet somehow all of it worked. You drift into the Hall of Tales, a vaulted chamber where the exploits of gods are etched in glowing runes and moving frescoes. The walls are alive with memory. Odin slaying frost beasts, Freya taming fire serpents, Balder being, well, luminous and vaguely tragic. Typical. And now someone, probably Loki, has already scrawled a crude chalk sketch in the corner. Thor in a dress holding Mjolnir above a wedding cake with a fuse sticking out of it. It's captioned, "The Thundering Bride." You snort, then sit. Because now in the stillness, the questions start to float in like smoke. Why did Thrym want to marry Freya? Beyond the obvious political leverage, beyond the lust and pride, what really drove him to dig a hammer out of the earth and dangle it like bait? Historians still argue, Loki says, suddenly behind you, because of course he's behind you. Whether Thrym's proposal was about power obsession or just a prank gone very, very wrong. You raise an eyebrow. Do you always sneak up like that? Only when people are brooding dramatically under magical frescoes, he says, flopping down beside you. He tosses you an apple. You earned a snack. You take a bite. It's crisp and cold and tastes faintly like stardust. Loki leans back on his elbows. Some scholars think the myth is a commentary on divine identity, that to wield power one must sometimes play roles that feel absurd, that the gods, for all their might, are at the mercy of perception. You glance sideways. You mean the dress? He nods. Thor doesn't lose anything by pretending. In fact, he wins everything his hammer has pried the day, but he has to wear a mask to do it. You consider that. It's easy to laugh at the story. It is funny, ridiculous. A myth that feels like a parody of itself, but under the frills and chaos, there's something sharp, something true. Thor was humiliated, then he was heroic, and maybe those things aren't so far apart after all. Loki stands, stretches, then adds, of course, my theory is that the whole thing was just the gods getting bored and staging the world's loudest prank. You chuckle. He winks. Anyway, I've got to go install some enchanted glitter in the wedding hall before anyone cleans it up. He vanishes down the corridor with a swirl of green. You stay behind a little longer, watching the glowing runes dance across the walls. They flicker gently, illuminating your face, your thoughts, your breath. And then the fresco on the far wall shifts. You see Thor in full battle rage bridal veil, fluttering eyes blazing. But instead of mockery, there's reverence in the light. He looks like what he is, a protector who will endure any indignity to keep his hammer and the realm safe, even if it means wearing lace.
You smile.
Then you rise, because tomorrow this will be another tale etched into the wall. A story passed around campfires and mead halls, half true and wholly ridiculous. And like every great myth, it says more than it seems. About courage, about masks, and about the gods we laugh at, and the reasons we need them anyway. By the next morning, word of the Thunder Bride incident has spread like wildfire through Asgard, and probably through Midgard too, if the ravens have been gossiping, which they absolutely have. You're woken by the sound of laughter, echoing from the training yard. Real full-bellied, unrestrained laughter. That's rare in a place where most mornings begin with sword drills and thunderclouds. Curious, you wander down in the crisp air, and there he is, Thor standing proudly at the center of a circle of warriors, reenacting the feast scene. He's waving around a ham hock like a prop, growling in falsetto, "I'm just a delicate bride with an appetite for violence." The crowd roars. Someone hands him a scrap of fabric, part of the dress, a curtain, you're not sure, and he drapes it over one shoulder like a shawl, continuing the tale with increasing flair. You find yourself both amused and surprised. He's owning it. Last night he looked drained. Today he's performing. Because Thor, for all his rage and bravado, knows what stories mean. He understands that the line between humiliation and legend is just a matter of delivery. And right now he's delivering the tale like a seasoned bard with a flair for slapstick. I took 9 barrels of mead, he proclaims, and only crushed 4 bones in the process. A personal record. Loki, perched on a barrel nearby, raises a goblet, and the most beautiful bride the 9 realms ever saw. Thor throws the ham hock at him. Loki catches it with one hand and a bow. You chuckle. Because this chaotic retelling, this joyful mockery, is how myths stay alive. They change in the retelling. They gain flavor, color, glitter, if Loki has anything to say about it. Later in the palace archives, you overhear a group of scribes already translating the story into verse. One's arguing over the best metaphor for the moment Mjolnir returned to Thor's lap. Like a kiss from the storm, someone suggests. No, like destiny wrapped in velvet and other offers. Or like a weaponized engagement ring, you mutter passing by. They pause, then scribble that one down. But beyond the jokes, there's something else happening now. Something subtle. Thor's thunder feels different. Calmer, lighter. You find him that afternoon polishing Mjolnir on the balcony, a half-finished mug of mead beside him. Didn't think I'd see you reenact the whole thing, you say. He shrugs. If I don't, Loki will, with extra glitter. You sit next to him. The sky is pale blue clouds drifting lazily like ships on holiday. It feels like peace, fragile but real. You embarrassed? He thinks for a moment, then shakes his head. Not anymore. The hammer's back. The realm's safe. And I got to flatten a wedding party with a lightning bolt. You grin. Not bad for a bride. Thor laughs, a genuine booming laugh that makes a few clouds tremble in the distance. You sip your own drink, feeling the warmth settle in your chest. Historians still argue whether you were the most terrifying cross-dresser in history. Thor leans back and smirks. Let them argue. I looked fabulous. Evening settles over Asgard like a velvet curtain, and the fires in the feasting halls burn lower now, less rowdy, more golden, more contemplative. You drift through the quiet corridors of the palace, each footstep echoing softly on polished stone. The chaos of the past day has faded into memory laughter, into legend, and in the distance you hear the soft clink of goblets, a murmur of voices. You follow it out to the garden terrace. There, beneath a tree strung with glowing rune lanterns, a few gods and scholars gather around an old seeress wrapped in silver furs. She sits cross-legged, stirring a cup of something that smells like pine and wisdom. They're not drinking for fun, they're debating. Why did this myth endure, one asks. It's so ridiculous. The seeress chuckles. Because it's honest. Because even gods can be made fools. And because mortals need to know that humiliation isn't the end of power. You settle quietly among them listening. One of the younger gods speaks up. But it doesn't mean anything, does it? It's just a comedy, a trick. Historians still argue, the seeress replies, whether this tale was born from sacred ritual or simple mischief. But that doesn't mean it lacks meaning. She leans forward, eyes glowing faintly. Thor's dress was a mask, and sometimes masks reveal more than they hide. The others go silent. Gods wear masks, she says softly. So do kings. So do warriors and lovers and poets. You too. This story. It's about power pretending to be powerless. About reclaiming your strength in a way no one expects. She smiles. And about the hammer. Always about the hammer. They chuckle at that. You think about everything you've seen, Thor's reluctant curtsy, the wedding feast of horror, the hammer cradled like a vow in silk-clad arms, the fury, the laughter, the embarrassment turned into legend. Yes, it's absurd, but it's also true, because no myth survives this long unless it feels true. Later that night, you return to the Hall of Tales. The wall glows with a new mural, Thor in veil and battle rage framed in blue fire. Loki smirking in the background, holding a bouquet that might be on fire, and the hammer, radiant as ever, poised mid-swing. You look at it and shake your head, smiling. And something catches your eye, a fresh set of runes, beneath the image scrawled in ink that still glistens. You step closer. It reads, "He who dares to laugh at himself will never fear the laughter of others." You wonder who wrote it. Odin, maybe, or Loki, or some quiet scribe who watched everything and saw the meaning beneath the madness. As you leave the hall, footsteps quiet on ancient stone, you realize that this story, Thor's wedding, the hammer heist. The chaos in Lace is no longer just something you witnessed. It's something you're part of. A tale retold, a legend in the making. And tomorrow someone will ask if it really happened. You'll smile and say, let me tell you how Thor wore a dress and saved the realms. The last rays of light bleed slowly behind Asgard's golden towers as the sky deepens into violet, then indigo, then something soft and quiet that only gods and ravens seem to recognize. The palace has gone still. Even the fountains murmur more gently now. You walk the upper corridors, a lone cloak brushing against polished stone. The bustle of gods in feasting mood has faded to a hush, and you welcome it. You're tired. Not just in the way bones tire, but the way the mind softens after a long, ridiculous, wonderful day that somehow managed to be equal parts absurdity and glory. From a high balcony, you look out over the realm. Below, the rainbow arc of Bifrost pulses faintly in the distance, humming with the power of the 9 realms. Somewhere out there, the frost giants are licking their wounds and reevaluating their taste in brides. Somewhere, Loki is no doubt already composing new versions of the tale, some scandalous, some heartwarming, all of them utterly impossible to verify. And in the stables, you hear Thor arguing with his goats again. The sound makes you smile. This isn't the kind of myth that ends with solemn silence or epic tragedy. It ends with laughter, with cracked ribs and spilled mead and a lingering aftertaste of roasted boar. It ends with gods bruised and bedazzled sitting around a fire, telling the same story for the 3rd time, and arguing over who looked more shocked, Thrym or the soup pot. And you surprisingly feel honored to have seen it. The truth is, no matter how old or mighty the gods are at their most human, when things go sideways, and no matter how ridiculous the disguise, courage, tends to shine through lace veil and all, you find yourself back in your own chamber, finally shrugging off your cloak and slipping under a thick woolen blanket. It smells faintly of cedar and stories. Outside your window, a gentle wind sways the trees of the courtyard, their silver leaves whispering soft nonsense into the night. Thor is laughing again, somewhere louder now. You hear the clang of Mjolnir against something that might have once been a goat trough. He sounds content. And for all the spectacle, the mess, the utter madness of it all, there is something peaceful in knowing that Asgard is safe for now. The hammer has come home, and so have you. The night grows quieter still. You shift beneath your blanket, listening to the world outside slow down. The wind settles into a steady sigh. The stars blink gently overhead. Somewhere distant, the faintest rumble of thunder echoes across the sky, not angry this time, just present, familiar. You let your breathing fall into rhythm with the silence. Long and slow out, the story lingers in your mind. The veil, the feast, the swing of the hammer, the surprise in Thrym's face, the roar of laughter in the aftermath. It all drifts gently through your memory like smoke curling through a cold room. You feel your limbs begin to sink into the bed, heavy with comfort. The walls around you soften into darkness. No danger, no noise, just quiet. Let your mind rest. Let the images blur. The sound of silk rustling, a glimmer of lightning tucked into a wedding gown, a smirk behind a tiara, and a hammer, returning home just as it always does. Even gods need to laugh. Even thunder has its quiet moments. And even a ridiculous story can carry a little truth tucked between the jokes. You're safe now. You're warm. Let the story fade and sleep.